Okay, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, welcome everybody to Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. And this is our 11th year. So I announced that before every meeting. I think it's very exciting. We've been doing this program for this long. And besides the exceptional presenters that we have every month, it's really because of all of you who tune in every month or every other month or however many times you tune in per year. Tonight's program is going to be introduced by Katie. As I explained to her, I had some oral surgery earlier this week, just got off the pain meds today, so I'm a little foggy. So I probably shouldn't even be talking in public, but I am. So anyhow, I want to mention who our sponsors are. Our regular sponsors are Save the Dunes, Michigan City Sustainability Commission, and 219 Green Connect. And Kathy Sipple, I see, is with us this evening. They provide us with our social media and our MailChimp platforms, so we're able to send out our announcements to all of you 1 week before and then the day of to remind you we're meeting. I want to mention our guest hosts this month are 95.1 FM AM 1420 WIMS. And Rick Federici, who's the station owner, has graciously offered us airtime every single month. So hopefully I'm going to remember to call in the mornings, and he's going to talk to us not only about green drinks, but anything green that's happening in our region. So I really want to acknowledge him for that generous offer that we're going to carry through on a monthly basis. Also, our other sponsor is host this evening is, of course, the Northwest Indiana Paddling Association. And Katie, I'll let you explain how they're our hosts this evening, okay? I'm going to turn over housekeeping to Katie at this point. And then at the end, don't let me forget that we're having actually an in-person, face-to-face green drinks next month on September 7th. And we're going to hold off the details until then. So all of you will stay through our announcements.
Smart. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Whether you are on Zoom or on Facebook Live, we're happy that you're spending the evening with us. Just want to let you know that everyone who is on Zoom is muted. Any questions that you have throughout this presentation, we invite you to drop those into the chat as they come to you, either on Zoom or in the comments on Facebook Live, and we will get to as many as we can if there is time at the end. This presentation is being recorded, and the recorded version will live on the Save the Dunes Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. And we also share the direct links to watch those in our monthly e-newsletter. So if you're not signed up for that, highly recommend you can head to our website, which is savedunes.org, to get signed up. But we encourage you to share the recording with your network, your family, your friends, spread the good word about all that we have going on. That is it for housekeeping. Would you like me to just introduce our presenters now?
That would be great, Katie. Thank you for doing that this evening.
Very welcome. So tonight we are joined by Dan Plath, who is the Director of Resource Management at the Indiana Dunes National Park and one of the founders of the Northwest Indiana Paddling Association, or NWIPPA. And we have Rob Albrect-Mallinger, who is the NWIPA Blueways Stewards. And they're going to be talking to us about the east arm of the Little Calumet River, going over history, tragedy, restoration, and future planning on this really wonderful water body in our region. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob to get us started.
Thanks, Katie, and thank Nancy, and hello to all of you. I am indeed Rob Albrect-Mallinger. While I start sharing my screen, I'll let Dan say hi to you too. We are the co-presenters here. So Dan, you want to say hi?
Hi, Hart. I was excited. I was looking at everybody who's joined us. So welcome, everybody. Looking forward to tonight for quite some time.
Great. So one of you responsible people confirm for me that you can actually see what I've got here?
Yes, looks good.
All right. Hang on a second. I have to make a small adjustment so that I can see myself what's going on. And I can't. Bingo. Hi. So the East Branch of the Little Calumet River. It is a fascinating and important natural and human history, and we're going to tell that story tonight. I'm going to talk about the very unusual character of the river and how it's changed specifically over the last 200 years. Dan is going to talk about the efforts to conserve, restore, and provide access to the river and the partners who are working on that. And then I understand if there's time left and there's interest, we'll take questions. But first, a short commercial, if I can make it work. Yes. So as Katie said, one of my roles is I'm the Blueways Steward for the Northwest Indiana Paddle Association. Formally founded in 2009, the Northwest Indiana Paddle Association is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the ideals of promoting the region's paddling resources and opportunities, providing environmental stewardship, education, and being a voice for the region's paddlers. This year, we will host about 10 public paddles, like the one on Trail Creek you see in the photo above, and 5 classes. We also help remove log jams and install launches in the areas, in particular, on the east arm of Little Calumet, tonight's topic. If you're interested in learning more about NWIPPA, we're going to put our website internet address in the chat. If you'd like to help us with river clearing, please send an email to the National Parks Volunteer Program and tell them you want to help with River Crew. That email address for that is also going to be in the chat. Okay, commercial over. Let's start by asking, where is the east arm of Little Calumet River? And as it turns out, the answer gets more complicated as you dig into it, and that is part of the amazing story. If you live near Chesterton and weren't aware of it before, you found out that the Little Calumet River enters town on Brummett Road last August when the bridge over it closed. And that's where the red pin is. I think you can see my little arrow on this map. The bridge just reopened a few days ago, much to the relief of motorists and bicyclists. So it flows from here along the yellow pins, through Chesterton, through Porter, through a central part of the national park, and all the way through Portage before it goes into Lake Michigan at Portage. So that's the simple answer to where the east arm is. But as we're going to learn, the full answer is complicated and it's important and it's often tragic. But let's say a little bit about what the east arm is like. For starters, it's home to a stunning variety of flora and fauna. On its banks, we see cardinal flowers, skunk cabbage, Joe Pye weeds, swamp marigolds, and wild berries. We see oaks, tulip trees, cottonwoods, pawpaws, maple and black walnut. We see beavers, deers, raccoons, and even now river otters. We see great blue herons and other kinds of herons, egrets, kingfishers, kingbirds, crows, cardinals, robins, hawks, eagles, a variety of ducks, warblers, and shorebirds. There are salmon, trout, bass, and catfish swimming in the water, and there are mussels, crawfish, and snails lining the riverbed. It absolutely teems with life. Paddlers use the river to take their kayaks and canoes down on their own. At some of the 10 events, that we host, NWIPPA hosts every year, are on the river. And now, just in the last month, a tour guide has started. We're very excited about that. We'll give you guided tours down the east arm of Little Calumet River. The passage from Calumet Avenue, Chesterton to Howell Road and Porter has been the most popular section. I'm there almost every day, and we see people out every day of the week through summer and fall. This year, we're planning to open up even more of that, and Dan's going to talk about what we're going to be doing to open it up more tonight. Now let's get into the bigger question about where it is. So how often do you actually see the picture of the headwaters of a river? There it is. The picture on the left where the water flows over those rocks is the very beginning of the Little Calumet River. That's at Red Mill Park in LaPorte County. I highly recommend you go there. It's a beautiful park, and you can dip your toe right there in the headwaters. Right there, that is 660 feet above sea level. Lake Michigan is, so it's right, I'll show you here on the map. From there to Lake Michigan, which is 90 feet lower, it's only 7.8 miles if you go the shortest distance there to the north-northwest. But question for you, does the river go there? I won't ask for a show of hands. I'll tell you the answer is no. And it never did. Let's go look at a real old map and see what the old map tells us. So the map up in the upper right is probably the first map of Indiana as a state. It was drawn around 1800. I've blown up the section that's the region, as we here in Northwest Indiana call it. And that's what's down here in this corner. French First Nation societies lived in that area, and indeed all around the Great Lakes area, for thousands of years. The area shown here was first visited by French explorers around 1679. One missionary, Jean de Brebeuf, apologies to those who actually speak French, wrote that the lakes and rivers are so full of fish that one can scarcely dip one's net without catching something. He also described how the Native Americans in the area hunted and trapped a wide variety of animals, including deer, beaver, which is a big driver for the settlement of it, bear and moose. Between then, all that time period, 1800, the river did not change. But at that time, interactions among the Native Americans, the French, Canadians, British, and American colonists brought lots of other changes sweeping through the region, culminating in around 1800 when the US Congress separated Ohio and Indiana, what was then called the Northwest Territories, and initiated a set of treaties that expelled most of the Native Americans from our area, at which time this map was drawn as part of that change. So this map shows the Little Calumet River flowing west into what is now Illinois, and then turning back to the east to where we called the Grand Calumet River, and entering the lake at what's now Marquette Park in Garea. You can also see in the map what you would now recognize as Lake Calumet over a little bit to the left. Wolf Lake is sort of vaguely represented there. And there's a continuous line going north that represents the Calumet River of Chicago. Now that Calumet River is on the southeast side of Chicago. Even though Chicago barely existed at the time, you see up in the upper left, Fort Dearborn, which is essentially all that Chicago was at that time. Now the map in general is correct. That is, the Little Calumet flowed west, turned in Illinois, and went back east. You can discern, if you look at the shoreline, a very fanciful looking shoreline there, that it falls a little bit short on precision. And in fact, the river, as we know as the Little Calumet, goes as far west as Blue Island, and did back then. Also, the river did not actually flow into Chicago's Calumet River past Lake Calumet at that time. At least, it did not do it for most of the year. I'm going to show you another more accurate map in a minute overlaying this that represents that. But the point is, this is indeed what the river did then, and to some extent does now. It flows over 60 miles to the west and 30 miles back to the east, instead of simply going north 7.8 miles to Lake Michigan. Why? But for that, we have to go even further back in time. Yikes, a glacier. So the glaciated region up in the map in the upper right-hand corner was called the Laurentide Ice Sheet. It was a massive continental glacier that covered most of Canada and stretched down to the states as far as Illinois and New York. And it was over 100,000 years that it did that, till around 10,000 BC when it started to retreat. The ice covering over Lake Michigan there was thought to be 1,000 feet thick. As the glacier melted, the predecessors to Lake Michigan grew, and it rose and fell depending upon where the water was able to leave the area from that time. So it would rise for a while and it would stay at a level, for a certain period of time, and then it would sink, and then it might sink again, it might rise. Each time it went through that cycle, a beach would be formed. We can see three distinct beach systems in the diagram shown in the lower left-hand side there, running parallel to the present-day shore of Lake Michigan. So if you know Lake County at all, Ridge Road very visibly runs on top of that thing called Calumet Beach. If you're more familiar with Porter and you start at Waverly Road at the lake, you find that you are descending as you go south. After you cross the top of Tolston Beach, as you head down to Interstate 94 in the Little Calumet River, and then you begin to rise again onto the Calumet Beach, which is represented there. So our Little Calumet River, for most of its length, runs between the Tolston Dune on the north here and the Calumet Beach on the south. So it runs through this channel here into Illinois to where it hits wetlands, and then it made that turn back into the stretch that we call the Grand Calumet River. So in fact, it's the melting glacier water and the changing levels of Lake Michigan that created beaches parallel to Lake Michigan that caused the rivers to run the shallow valleys between those beach ridges. So the map drawn in 1800 was essentially correct. About 40 or 50 years later, Illinois the state was surveyed. They created the more detailed map here, which shows that area. And indeed, this is pretty much the way the Little Calumet River flows now. This is the area of Blue Island here to where it turns back east. So that is the way the river was in 1800. That's the way it was for hundreds and hundreds of years before then. But after 1800, things started to change. Now, I'm going to add this little simple diagram here so we can follow together and keep track of how the geology has changed and what the interventions that happened were. So in summary, as the glaciers left, our river started at Red Mill Park, flowed west and turned to Blue Island, and flowed back east to Lake Michigan at Marquette Park. With all the twists and turns, it was 100 miles or more. So during the early 1800s, European settlers in that area in the South Chicago, they wanted to develop their community. They were sort of the leaders of Chicago at the time. They thought that creating a good harbor and a larger river would bring development to that area. They noticed that in the spring, the area separating the Calumet River from the Little and Grand Calumet River was in fact a very wet wetland. And they got the idea to dig a channel from the Little Calumet to feed more water into the Calumet River, and it worked. During the rest of the 19th century, other projects expanded on the diversion. They built a proper harbor at the mouth of Lake Michigan, still in use today. They continually widened and straightened the Calumet River. To keep the river open, it's been dredged continuously over the 19th and 20th centuries. The discharges from the industry that lined its shores caused that dredged material to contain lead, mercury, arsenic, cyanide, cadmium, polychlorinated biphenyls. What to do with those dredgings is a major issue in the East Chicago area right now. During that century, another change happened. Somewhere around 1860, the Lake Calumet changed. Before that, it was simply a swampland, very much the center of life and residences for Native Americans, a big game area. But when shipping became available with the modified Calumet River, industry looked at that area and thought that they could use it to fill in, to create land for docking areas and factories that were connected to Lake Michigan via the Calumet River. That enterprise consumed even more water from the Little Calumet River system. Great schemes were created and half executed right up to the end of the 20th century. Most of them went nowhere, and a lot of the area was abandoned. But there was a legacy of incinerators, drum storage, and illegal dumping that has left that area highly polluted. So what happened? Between 1809 and 1890, the canal was built, it was expanded, the Calumet River was expanded, the Lake Calumet was developed, and this diversion was added. And flow to the Grand Calumet reduced. Let's move on. 1906, the Indiana Harbor and Shipping Canal was built to create a waterway that would supply steel and other industries in the area. It connected the Grand Calumet to Lake Michigan in East Chicago. It diverted even more water from the Calumet River system. Currently, 90% of the water that flows through it, wherever it begins, is actually an outflow of industry outflow, or it's stormwater overflow. Heavy pollution in the early 20th century resulted in it having the dubious distinction of the only waterway listed by the EPA as having 14 out of a possible 14 impairments. Let's look at that. So 1906, this was added. The Indiana Harbor Canal was built. More water was drawn out of the Grand Calumet. The river to the east began to die out. Let's move on again. 1911, construction was begun on the Calumet-Saguenashkee Canal. We know it as the CalSag. It took 12 years to build. It was dug to reverse the flow of the Little Calumet for the purpose of draining untreated sewerage discharged into the river away from Lake Michigan and into the Chicago Sanitary and Shipping Canal, which the Sag Channel connected to for the west. From the point where our Little Calumet River made that hairpin turn near Blue Island, the canal goes a little bit east to where the Grand Calumet connects near Calumet, and it goes west to connect the Sanitary and Shipping Canal, which flows into the Des Plaines River and ultimately Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico. And the reverse flow goes that way. It's been expanded over the years to allow more and more commercial barge traffic, but the primary purpose of the CalSag was and remained to drain sewage and stormwater away from the lake. And it worked. It worked for Chicago. But St. Louis reported their caseload of typhoid doubled in the 4 years following the opening of the CalSag Channel. Also, it's not only humans that were affected by it. Like the St. Lawrence Seaway, the CalSag Channel connects the Great Lakes to other body of waters from which, for thousands of years, Great Lakes have been isolated. Scientists have now identified 39 invasive species poised to ride the canal either in or out of the Great Lakes. So let's chart that change on our little system here. CalSag Channel diverts more water. The flow of the Little Calumet River no longer goes directly into there. Most of it's going to the CalSag Channel. That takes more water away from this. Grand Calumet peters out. At this point, the Grand Calumet no longer reaches Lake Michigan, leaving only lagoons at Marquette Park as a reminder. 20 saw digging more canals. 1926, in an effort to drain more wetlands, which was a big thing at that time in the region, away from the Little Calumet watershed, the Burns Harbor, or Burns Ditch, as everybody here calls it, was dug. It connected the Little Cal to Lake Michigan in Portage. This let water flow out of the east arm more quickly, and it actually reversed the flow of water in the river to the west of Portage. So yes, we now have two reversals of Little Calumet River flow. Additional channels were cut to straighten out the river both east and west of where Burns Ditch is. All right, so we're at the end of our little diagrams, but let's finish it out. So we've now added this intervention here. Burns Ditch at Portage, taps it at Portage, flows into Lake Michigan, diverting more water. The flows to the west were reduced. In fact, the flows in this section here are almost none. It flows to the east. Maybe it flows to the west with a lot of water. A lot of times it doesn't flow at all. Wait, there's one more. Where the Little Calumet completed its hairpin turn and joined the Grand Calumet, a very large lock and dam was built and put into service in 1965. As you cross that, the bridge over the Little Cal on the Bishop Ford Expressway, it's just around the corner to your right. It replaced another lock that was much further to the west. And its purpose was to build a much larger size to enable much larger rafts of barges. So the new dock's larger size enables much larger rafts of barges to use the CalSag Channel, turning it into a commercial waterway that connect anything from the Mississippi, the Gulf through the Mississippi up, actually to Chicago through that harbor that was started at the beginning of the 19th century. It provides a very big incentive to keep that man-made water open. All right, I'm done with the diagrams. That's the last one right there. Flow now is prevented at all from going there. The last nail in the coffin is there. No water goes into here. The Grand Calumet River is essentially dead. Here's the result. This region was one big watershed. That was flowing into Lake Michigan. It's now become 3 distinct waterways. This one continues to flow into Lake Michigan via the Burns Ditch. This one watershed flows into the Calumet River, the Sag Channel, Illinois, Mississippi, etc., and goes to the Gulf. This watershed, in essence, doesn't flow. The only section of the river system that flows in essentially the same channel, in the same direction, with the same flow, is the section in the green box. And that is the east arm of the Little Calumet River, the topic of our discussion tonight. So here's the punchline of my part of tonight's things. If you were going to start to try to return the river to an ecosystem for natural resources and a place for people to enjoy, wouldn't you start there? Again, you won't be tested. The answer is yes. Good news is things start to change in a different direction in 1966. The National Park Service opened Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore in 1966. You've probably heard of Henry Cowles. He published an article entitled Ecological Relations of the Vegetation of Sand Dunes of Lake Michigan in the Botanical Garden, in the Botanical Gazette in 1899, that established him as the father of plant ecology in North America. And it also brought international attention to the intricate ecosystem that we live in. It took another 67 years of activism for the national park to be authorized in that area. When it was built in 1966, the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore protected not only the beaches and the woods behind them, but also included sections of the east arm of the Little Calumet River, here, the Heron Rookeries, and it included areas through Porter and onto Burns Harbor. And that was included in their property and increasingly in their program. The Little Calumet River to the west has also been undergoing change. There was construction for flood control and recreation. The project is led by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Chicago District. It started in 1990. The project includes construction of 22 miles of levees and flood walls and almost 17 miles of hiking trails and biking trails, like you see in this picture here. That area is co-managed with the Little Calumet River Basin Development Commission. 2009, as I mentioned, a group of avid paddlers got together and founded NWIPPA. Our stewardship program includes clearing log jams and supporting increased access. The East Arm has been a special project in NWIPPA from the very beginning days. Shirley Hines Land Trust is a nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of natural areas in Northwest Indiana. In 2010, it acquired its first property along the East Arm, Wykes Plampin Preserve, which is shown in this one here. This was just the first of a series of acquisitions along the Little Cal by Shirley Hines. So I maintain that the arc of history has bent a little. What has been a story of ecological disasters has started to become a story of conservation, preservation, and recreation access. And Dan's going to pick up the thread. Before I go, let me share some good sources of information. If you want to learn more about the East Arm or look for some of the sources of those cool pictures I've got, I recommend the 3 books at the top and the 4 websites shown below. We're going to put these references into the chat box so you can copy them from there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and stop sharing my screen.
All right. Especially Calumet Beginnings, I'd highly recommend that one. That is should be a must read for anybody who lives in Northwest Indiana. I think I've read it 4 times. 3 of them while my wife was in labor. I actually read those books front to back. That's how long she was in labor. So anyways, I am going to share my screen. let's see. Tell me when.
Yep, looks good.
All right, cool. So picking up where Rob left off, really what has happened in the last, especially since 2009, 2010, really has been a success story of different nonprofits as well as governmental organizations and some for-profit groups, businesses have gotten involved in kind of focusing on the East Branch of the Little Calumet River as a conservation corridor. The Paddling Association, surely we'll get into a lot of the partners later on, have really been integral to this from the beginning. So this map actually comes from Shirley Hines, and in 2009, like what Rob had talked about, there was a acquisition that is become the Wykes-Plampin property. I believe the first was a 42-acre acquisition, and then it just has kind of snowballed ever since then. So since then, really what has transpired is what the original goal of the Indiana Dunes National Park and National Lakeshore previously wasn't able to do. So the national park is kind of the darker green part here. And we had several dunes expansion bills throughout the 70s and 80s that had failed. There was some opposition that rose up over the years in some of these areas over close to Westville and so forth. And the park basically still remained very fragmented, even though it is still pretty fragmented today. But what has happened is with groups like Shirley Hines, the DNR, Isaac Walton League, and other nonprofits along that corridor, has basically solved or put together for conservation purposes what the national park wasn't able to do before. So it's pretty exciting to see something, 30 some years later come to fruition, and actually probably better than what it ever could have imagined if it was just the national park that was managing that area. This has really kind of become the stone soup of different organizations have all contributed their own different ways towards this larger goal of restoration, creating public access, recreation, and as well as creating habitat for nature along this corridor that largely has become has not been polluted. Rob talked a lot about the West Branch and the Grand Calumet River, and there's always a lot of confusion because they're all called the Calumet. It has a very confusing history of what had transpired, but generally speaking, the East Branch really has never had any industry on it. What pollution we have had has usually been through municipal wastewater treatment plants, as well as septic systems, and then some ag runoff. But those have been the primary issues that we've been dealing with. The good thing is a lot of the issues around the combined sewer overflows have really gotten under control. The SSOs, those were in Porter, and those were the storm sewer runoffs, have all been diverted over to Chesterton, who had built this very large retention basin. So they're able to process that wastewater when we would have these large storm events like what we just had this last week, actually. Ordinarily, they were having 8 or 9 combined sewer overflow discharges into the river in a bad year. Now, I think that in the last 5 or 6 years, I think there's only been 1. So huge success story. And it really has kind of coincided with these, they call them 100-year floods, and then even 500-year floods. We are averaging, I think, very much driven by climate change. 100-year floods every few years, honestly, is what we've been seeing on the Little Cal. So these are all properties that this necklace of conservation has happened, kind of bringing the national park and connecting the national park, and each one of them have really helped solidify public access and provided habitat for the rebound of nature along that way. So here's some highlights for what has transpired. So since 2010, Shirley Hines actually has kind of helped lead the way in terms of land conservation and preservation along the river. Since that 42-acre acquisition at the corner of Brummett over by Brummett Schools happened, between Shirley Hines and a number of other groups, including the DNR, almost 1,900 acres have now become permanently preserved along that corridor. A lot of restoration has happened too throughout that area. A lot of these areas were really threatened by development. The DNR basically took what was the state prison farm, and that was actually up for auction and had been subdivided, and that could have been literally hundreds if not thousands of houses along that area. Luckily, the right people and the right conversations happened behind the scenes, and about 10 years ago it came off the auction block and it became the Reynolds Creek Fish and Wildlife Area, preserving 1,200 acres of it, which has helped tremendously kind of solidify and also eliminate a lot of the storm, and not storm sewer, but the agricultural runoff that we had in some of those areas previously. Shirley Hines as well has continued just whittle away at creating access all the way along the river, picking up new properties. Every time I talk to Shirley Hines, they're always have another deal, what's in process. A lot of them have been purchased, several of them have been donated, and then groups like Isaac Walton have gotten involved, and together we've got about 1,900 acres along that corridor preserved, which weren't in the public access previous to that. About 5.5 acres or 5.5 miles of new hiking trails have developed along the river. For the last almost 10 years, I think about 8 years, we've been maintaining a stretch of river between basically Brummett School and Howe Road in the national park. We received a couple pretty sizable grants working with Shirley Hines and Save the Dunes, helping as our fiduciary partner, as well as a number of other organizations. And this year we're going to be adding on another 7.5 miles from Howe Road to Lake Michigan, and then 2.7 miles from the Dell Inquest Nature Preserve, which is right outside the Heron Rookery, to Brummett Road. So roughly about 15.5 to 16 miles of water trail is going to be hopefully done this year. A number of access sites have been created, including one fully accessible one at Howe Road. We've also applied for funding for an additional fully accessible, ADA accessible kayak launch at 149. But besides that, we've improved a number of different spots, mostly on Shirley Hines properties, as well as MPS properties. Going on from there, a lot of different things have kind of snowballed since then in terms of positive movement. One of the things that folks will probably be hearing about in the next year or so, the National Park has partnered with Shirley Hines Land Trust, and we're undergoing what's called an environmental assessment. Basically, it's like an feasibility of whether or not we would want to re-meander the Heron Rookery. The Heron Rookery is basically just a straight channel that goes through that unit of the national park, but 120 years ago, it meandered all over the place, and you can still see on aerial photos the scars of what those meanders are. So one of the things that we're looking very closely at is reconnecting those old meanders and making it more of a natural system than what it used to be, rather than being kind of a farm ditch, which is what it's pretty much functioning as at this point. That being said, the rookery is pretty remarkable how it's recovered kind of on its own over the years. We do shock fishing in the rookery in some of the most biodiverse places, and some of the biggest surprises we find. I helped Dr. Charlie Morris at the park I think it was last summer, we were shock fishing it, and we were finding things like mud puppies out there that had never even been documented in the park. They're a type of salamander we were finding when we were shock fishing, and pretty exciting stuff. Another thing, a byproduct, what happened about 5 or 6 years ago, we were out doing logjam modification, and we discovered that there were some native mussel beds. Up until that point, we thought that all of the mussels had been extirpated in the national park and in the Little Calumet River. Since then, it's really snowballed within the park, and also with partnership with the DNR, that we are growing mussels in captivity with the goal of restoring native mussels back to the Little Calumet River. Mussels really act as kind of the kidneys, kind of like wetlands do, to help filter out what goes out eventually to Lake Michigan that most of us are drinking in this area. And it'll help restore kind of that natural balance and clean up the water. And then the other thing is just kind of the intrinsic cool factor of restoring mussels to a place that there was just some very few remnant populations that somehow or another had held on. Since then, we've been working pretty hard on restoring native mussels. We could actually do a whole green drinks just on our mussel restoration project, which folks might be interested in the future. But something that we have going at the national park and working with a number of our partners on. Shirley Hines primarily, as well as groups like DNR and Isaac Walton, have been working hard on acquisition, restoration, and farmland preservation. Save the Dunes has also been involved with a lot of the water quality side of things, with helping develop watershed management plans. And then the Urban Waters Coalition, which currently is being led by Victoria Wittig, who was from Save the Dunes previously, as well as a number of different folks like Natalie Johnson, and who originally was our Urban Waters coordinator, and Jen Birchfield helped a lot of the watershed management plans and conservation action plans, working with a number of different partners who quite a few of them are actually on this. I notice watching our green drinks right now, so happy to see folks involved with that. Additionally, outreach grants, Save the Dunes has really kind of figured out this great niche role. The national park we can't always efficiently spend money and get grants as well as what we can with our partners who are a lot more nimble than we are. We do what we can. We're kind of the heavy lifter on some of these grants like GLRI, but on the other hand, things like the Shykel Rivers grant, a number of our partners get involved in most of these improvements that we're seeing, especially around public access and infrastructure, is being driven from them. And groups like NIPSCO, and now previously ArcelorMittal and Cleveland Cliffs have also contributed to NWIPPA, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which has helped kind of provide funding for a lot of this work that's taken place. So it's really been kind of a real cool thing. This coalition of groups have gotten involved on a number of different fronts to improve the East Branch of Little Cal. Excuse me here. Public access, training, clearing, safety, and paddling events. That's really a lot of the fun stuff the Paddling Association has been right in the middle of, and we really kind of we feel like the catalyst to try and bring a lot of these different partners together. Partnerships exist between Shirley, Hines, Save the Dunes, DNR, NWIPPA, Isaac Walton, Porter County Stormwater is getting very involved. They have a much more ecologically focused mission now. 10, 15 years ago, some of the outlook of these organizations looked at how we manage stormwater different. Now we're looking a lot more in terms of retaining stormwater using wetland restoration and so forth to contain and filter it rather than just getting it off the water, get it out of here as fast as we can. So we've been really excited about how the county and a number of these organizations have evolved over the years as kind of the science has gotten better too. National Park Service, Friends of Indiana Dunes has really become instrumental in helping fund a number of the smaller things that we need to do that the larger pots of cash aren't as nimble to do. Friends of Indiana Dunes has been able to step in. Burns Harbor, Chesterton, Town of Porter, Indiana Dunes Tourism, and many others have gotten involved. So I had why do we do this? Obviously we're trying to restore more of the natural balance, but kind of the old adage, what's the build it and they'll come. We really kind of see that in the Indiana Dunes region. As we restore these natural areas, we're getting creatures that are returning almost miraculously to our areas that hadn't been here or been extirpated for hundreds of years. The picture on the left is kind of something that's actually causing a bit of a stir right now. This is called a limpkin, and this limpkin is actually visiting a little wetland right next to Brummett and a number of the Shirley Hines properties. So this bird has strayed quite a ways away from its native range up here that is feasting on mussels that we didn't even know were in that area today. This is actually happening today. This picture was taken, and these are from South America, Central America on to the Gulf Coast, but we had a visitor. In the middle, we had a river otter that we're starting to get them in the Great Marsh and starting to see some evidence of them on the east branch of the Little Calumet as well, return of the Great Marsh. So what the river otters like to eat, mussels. So Charlie Morris and the park have their work cut out for us. We got to up our production of mussels to make sure that hungry otters too are satisfied. And then the fun side of it, our friend, a number of us, you can see in the photo there, but that is Lee Stepansky, who's kind of a regular at a number of our events, and we see folks like them, repeat customers going out almost every day when we're out doing clearing. We're seeing people showing up, as we get segments of the river opened up. They're literally standing behind us as we're sawing our way through because they're discovering these places that really have been inaccessible for 40 or 50 years. Here, this was actually one what Rob had here. So that's my primary presentation. At the very end, I have to make a shameless plug. Where are we here? Monarch Music Festival. We always have to make a shameless plug like we did, but this is benefiting Save the Dunes, and put this on your calendars for September 10th. If you like what you're seeing on the Little Calumet River, it helps aid a lot of these efforts. So I always have to make a pitch for it, and Save the Dunes, Zig the Dunes, a number of different partners involved. So that I would digress, but that's my shameless plug for that. So.
And truly, Dan, your real shameless plug is your children are the opening band
That too.
for the event, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Katie, if you would help facilitate questions, that would be great. We don't have a whole lot of time left because I know that you and Kathy and I, we all have announcements to make, okay?
Okay, if you have a quick question, please feel free to drop it in a chat. We'll get to a couple of them. So far, I have one. We've been using the terms East Branch of the Little Calumet River and East Arm of the Little Calumet River kind of interchangeably. Is there any difference in that terminology, or like who uses it and when we use it?
Not really. It's pretty interchangeable. It depends on who you talk to. The Army Corps of Engineers, I've seen them generally refer to it as the East Branch of the Little Calumet River, but I think it's kind of used interchangeably.
Well, that's nice and confusing.
Yeah.
I always
Like
guess
everything
when
else
I'm,
with the river, it is.
when I'm writing a grant, I'm like, which one am I supposed to use? I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm glad there's no real answer.
It's
Okay.
like, is it coals or cowls? Nobody can ever answer that one either.
I get that with Tolston and Tolston too.
Yep.
I just can't. Okay. I don't see any more questions coming through, but I learned so much. I'm really grateful for those presentations.
Was there anything on Facebook, Katie?
No, just
No?
a lot of kudos and wow,
Oh,
interesting,
okay,
well done
great.
kind of things, but no questions.
We
Okay,
accept those.
okay, so then I guess I'll go ahead and make the first announcement if I can. Coming up on August 23rd, 2023, which is a Wednesday from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. is Drive Clean Indiana's annual conference and expo. It's happening in Michigan City at the Blue Chip Casino. And this is all about electric vehicles and electric chargers. They have an exhibit hall, which is unbelievable. They had like 6 electric cars last year that you could sit in and have your picture taken, all the way from the Ford Mustang to the BMW and Tesla, of course. They have educational breakout sessions. They'll have a networking event the night before in the evening. And in order to go to that, you do need to sign up for the conference. And they're also going to celebrate their annual award winners. Michigan City Sustainability Commission does have a table with 10 paid seats. So if you're interested in attending, feel free to send me an email. There's a good chance that we'll be able to accommodate people outside of the Sustainability Commission. And my email is nancyforvision@gmail.com. nancyforvision@gmail.com. Just drop me a line and I'll connect with you, okay? I'm going to let you, Kathy, make the announcement about September 7th, since you've been centrally involved in planning for our next green drinks in cooperation with the Climate Leadership Summit 8.
Okay, thank you. You threw me because I was loading up chat to hit send about the National Wildlife Federation thing. So maybe I'll put that in there right now as I'm talking about the Climate Leadership Summit, because I had that queued up. But yeah, what Nancy is saying is very exciting, and we are very grateful to many partners on this call to be sponsors of the upcoming Earth Charter Indiana Climate Leadership Summit. It's the 8th annual, and it's the first time ever that it'll be hosted in the region. It'll be happening Friday, September 8th at IUN in Gary. And the evening before, on the traditional green drinks night, like Nancy said, we're going to have, for the first time in a very long time, an in-person green drinks event. So the way you can get to that is either to go to the main Climate Leadership Summit invitation that I put down at the bottom. And if you scroll to the bottom of that page, there's an additional sign up that is only for the evening before. And I'll just go ahead and put that link in there separately too. But what that's going to be is a free to the public film screening of the film that came out in 2016, Shifting Sands on the Path to Sustainability. So still really relevant, really great film. It'll be a double feature. There's another film that I have not yet seen called Liminal. So that'll be starting at 7 p.m. And that'll be at, I think the the landing page still says the Savannah Center, but I think we've been moved across Broadway to a different auditorium. So that'll be updated soon, I'm sure. If you reserve your space, you'll get, updated information about specifics on, parking and the exact location. Anything I'm leaving out, Nancy?
I think they were looking at the Arts Center, which is the auditorium, which is across the highway you're referring to, but I know that they'll keep everybody updated on the Climate Leadership Summit 8 page. And if you're signed up to receive emails from Green Drinks through MailChimp, then you'll definitely hear from us also. And I'll keep the people at Save the Dunes updated, and it will come out in the Save the Dunes newsletter also. So great opportunity to sign up for the Save the Dunes newsletter, which, conveys a number of the things that are happening. Just go to the website and say, you want to receive the newsletter. Kathy, do you want to talk about the Northwest Indiana region certification? Like we're just 100 points away or something?
Thank you. Yeah, we're just over 100 points away. This was like the first ever multi-county approach to certifying a region as a wildlife habitat, a community wildlife habitat with the National Wildlife Federation. They had done cities before, which I found out about almost a year ago here at Green Drinks. So Green Drinks is the gift that just keeps on giving. Leslie Shad, who now lives part-time in Michigan City, part-time in Evanston, had gotten the city of Evanston certified. So I really learned from her, the how and the what and the why. And it's a really great program. I am working in conjunction with Shirley Hines for this to be a feeder so that they can hopefully, like upsell or work with people to remove their invasives and plant more natives and everything. So to be honest, the National Wildlife Federation, it's a pretty easy lift. If you haven't certified your yard already, please click on the link I put in chat. It's nwf.org/certify. You don't have to do anything special. Simply, if you live in our region, when you certify your home certification counts as a point toward our regional total. And we'd really love to get to that total by the time that the Climate Leadership Summit rolls around. We would just really like to celebrate everybody who's been a part of that journey. Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, and if you're part of a school or a church or other organizations, we actually get like 3 points for each of those, I think.
And
So,
5 for school.
5 for schools.
Yeah.
So if you have connections to any of those in Northwest Indiana, that's a way to help us get there more quickly.
Thank you for that opportunity.
And Katie, I know you have some announcements. Maybe Dan gave one of those already.
Yes, thank you so much, Dan. I'm gonna say it again. We would like to invite everyone to please join us on September 10th for our Monarch Music Fest. It's going to be held at the Brewery Lodge and Supper Club in Michigan City. So I will drop the Eventbrite sign up link into the chat. Please grab your tickets, grab your friends. It's a wonderful time, great food, great music. Yeah, hope you can join us. And I'm going to turn it over to Em, who's our.
I'm going to say you can get discounted tickets now. So, if you're sure you're going, buy the ticket now because you can save a few dollars on
The
that.
early bird, yeah, our early bird ticket price. Thank you for that, Nancy. And Em is joining us today. She's our new community engagement coordinator. So we have one other event that she's going to share.
Hi, everybody. So on August 23rd, we will be hosting our first event in a seasonal series titled the Barker Seasonal Forum. It'll be a 4 times yearly forum hosted at the historical Barker House that also serves as our Save the Dunes headquarters. With each season highlighting one of the pillars of our focus of work at Save the Dunes. So that will be on August 23rd. It's a Wednesday, the same day as Nancy's event that she plugged. And so if you're in Michigan City, stay around and come to the event at the Barker House. And we will be focusing on advocacy for wetlands and talking about the federal rollback on the wetland protections, what you can do as a community member to get involved in protecting those wetlands and just learn about what a wetland is and how important they are in our area. So please come by, and that will be up on our Facebook page too. It is already up as an event on our Facebook page, so feel free to find it on there. Yeah.
Great. I just really want to thank Dan and Rob for being with us this evening, and found just this week the coolest picture of both of them in kayaks. So if you haven't seen those, please go on to one of the social media sites and take a look at the two of them looking really cute in their kayaks, and really very inspirational. You guys are out there doing the hard hands-on work. For all of us, it makes it possible for us to enjoy our open waterways that don't have the log jams in them anymore. And I was hoping you'd show some of those chainsaw pictures. Darn it, anyhow, we didn't get to see some of those action shots, but perhaps next time. Thank you both from the bottom of my heart for offering to do this session.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
the opportunity to talk.
Nice job, everyone.
Okay.